This is our 2019 Q3 newsletter, and ultimately what we'd like to do is have an informal Q&A with Jonathan about a topic that's really critical, that many of you have already fed back to us, that's critical both in the sort of world of recruitment, in finance professionals doing brilliantly at work, and generally what's going on in the sort of news and topics of a senior finance professional. And that's very much going to be talking about the role of a finance business partner and seeking Jonathan's opinion on that and how that has worked for him, not only in his current business but also in his career to date. So enough about me. I'd love to ask Jonathan just to introduce himself and give you a bit of background as to where he is and where he's come from.
Hi, thanks Ben, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name's Jonathan Millam. I work for Equinity. I'm the Group Finance Planning and Analysis Director. I've worked for Equinity for 2 years. I've been in industry for around 20 years. Before Equinity I worked for American Express, and before that British Airways. I've looked for companies that are multinational, that are in and around the centre of the global economy, and look for businesses where I really get to continue to learn and develop in the roles that I'm doing. The roles that I've undertaken over the last 20 or so years have typically been on business planning and reporting of financial results, on financial analysis, but I've spent quite a lot of time working with business partners on decision support and doing commercial finance work as well.
So the purpose of today's debate is really to talk about what does a real finance business partner look like, and I've asked Jonathan to debate that with me because certainly in the world of senior finance recruitment it's the most overly used phrase, and probably one of the hardest for people looking for an opportunity or people looking to get on in their careers to really articulate whether they truly are being a commercial business partner. So I guess before we get into that, it'd be really useful just to get your take on what in your mind, Jonathan, is a true finance business partner, and what is he or she doing daily, weekly, monthly?
Yep. Yeah, sure, Ben. So for me, it's the finance function that helps and prepares the decisions for the business to take that's going to enable us to drive shareholder value. And there's always going to be an element in financial business partnering of doing historical financial reporting to see where the business has come from. But effectively these roles in my mind are forward-looking, commercial, and will involve a lot of analysis that will help make the right financial decisions. Some examples could be, it could be traditionally looking after a P&L and helping the division hit the profit targets and hit the revenue targets, or it could be preparing business cases for investment proposals, whether it's capital expenditure or an acquisition investment. Could be working with a corporate development team on mergers acquisitions, figuring out which business you might want to buy, or it might be a division within the organisation that you want to dispose of. So it covers off a range of things, but it's effectively planning for the future and helping the organisation prepare and create choices to make decisions from.
And in terms of the stakeholders that these people will be partnering day in, day out, typically in your world, who should they be?
So I work with the corporate development team a lot. I work with the chief information officer, and in my previous role within Equinity, I worked with the chief executive of the division that I worked in, EQ Invest. Historically at American Express, be working with country managers. Within American Express, it could be that there's a leader that's responsible for deal making and negotiating with big airline partnerships, for instance. So it's typically working with commercial partners within the business that are helping to grow the business. But business partnership can be about managing costs. It could be working with the operational guys or the customer service guys on how you deliver operational efficiencies and margin improvements. So it's across the board. You can work with the whole organisation.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've looked at what you think the business partner is doing daily from a sort of roles and responsibilities perspective.
Yeah.
If you're thinking more along the lines of key skills, what would you say epitomise a true business partner from that perspective?
Yeah, sure. There's 4 for me, Ben. The first one's financial analysis, influencing communication skills and then driving results as well. So if we take them one by one, financial analysis, for me it's taking data and turning it into information. It's business intelligence, and it's providing and understanding that information and creating recommendations off the back of it. That's a critical skill, and from a macro perspective, data is becoming a bigger part of our lives. So how the finance business partner population adapts to understanding and owning big data will be something that we need to develop over the next few years, I think. Another critical skill for me is influencing. So it's one of those areas where it requires a big investment in time to work with your business partners and build trust, build credibility, and to understand the business, have that commercial acumen. And once you start to have that credibility, the trust, you have the commercial acumen, then you can really start to influence and have a seat at the table with the business partner themselves. Now, we obviously look at a lot of information within finance, so a critical skill is how we communicate that to our business partners as well. I think it's really critical that we have a few clear key messages, that we present numbers in an easily understandable way, and that we provide context to some of the work that we're doing as well. And if you think about how you might want to present financial information to a business partner as well, you've got to kind of know your story. You've got to have the 30-minute view or maybe the 2-minute view.
Yeah.
You've got to really understand and be able to zoom into the detail or zoom out from a headline perspective. And I think one of the other things is you've got to say what you really feel and be honest about what you think about the information that you're presenting.
Yeah.
So you do the financial analysis, you influence someone so they're listening, you present the financial information. The final piece for me is driving results. So you've got to take personal accountability. You come up with a recommendation, you've got to make sure that the organisation sees it through, and then you're driving results to get the thing done that you've set out at the beginning.
And just picking up on that last point, because I would imagine if you're a VP of FP&A, driving results with the level at which you're operating is easier than if you're a commercial analyst, 3 or 4 years PQE, and you've got, let's say it's someone that's business partnering a CIO, a tough CIO, and the objective of that commercial business partner is to drive costs around the investment in technology. However, that CIO could be really tough, really challenging. Being a true business partner, listening to you, is about communicating and getting the story right for him or her as that stakeholder. But driving results, how does a 3-year PQE type individual really do that with that tough stakeholder in your experience, either looking at yourself back in the day or perhaps people that you've hired who've done incredibly well in that position? Yeah,
it's a good question, and it's never easy. That's the final piece, I think, is actually making the difference and actually getting some change in the P&L, whether it's extra revenue or less cost from the recommendations you're making. I think you kind of need to get a number of stakeholders and a different number of audience involved in the decision making. I think it's important that you spend time with your boss, getting them on board. And it's important that you kind of maybe pick off a couple of key individuals that can help drive your decision making through the organisation as well. Make sure that they're on board. Make sure if you're presenting to a broader audience that maybe you spend a couple of minutes talking to the people that are going to be in that are going to be influencing decision making within that team on board at the beginning, so that they have the questions answered before you get there. But it's being a little bit dogmatic as well, and just keep insisting and keep pushing.
It's really interesting. You talk about not being a yes man or woman in that role as well. I certainly think, from my perspective, when I meet candidates, clients alike, the true business partner, from my experience, is the person that has the sort of get up and go, the ability to stand up and say, actually, that doesn't work, and really challenge those numbers appropriately. You talked about communication, but from a sort of true business partner perspective, I think if you're able to in the right manner challenge appropriately, that adds massive value. And you can think of countless people that may have worked with you in the past who've actually not been shy of credibly putting that argument towards you or a stakeholder at your level. I think that really helps people at a slightly more junior level take confidence that actually that's what the business requires. They don't want a yes person. They want someone that's going to really work with them and know the business inside out to provide that commercial analysis you talk about. Yeah,
I think so, and that comes back to the influencing piece for me. It's being credible, understanding your numbers, understanding the business, so you can talk around those different pieces. And if you are challenged on a number or an area, you have the answer, you have a solution, and that then gives the credibility and the trust in the business partner that they'll then listen to the recommendations you're making.
And the analytical piece, I think, is critical. Whenever we meet individuals who are talking about being a finance business partner, you often ask about, give examples of where you've deciphered complex data and made a really meaningful story, and how has that then created value. So you talked earlier about shareholder value. And that's where a lot of this stops, and I think a lot of people say, I'm a true commercial analyst or business partner, but when you dig deep into those examples, actually what a lot of people are good at is deciphering data, but then not making that so meaningful in order to tell a story, to which actually might drive margin, might drive sales, might change the flow of costs for technology or whatever. Would you agree in that kind of concept that can be a stumbling block for people, is not taking it that bit further in creating the narrative?
Yeah, completely agree. When I talk to people about performance appraisal, whether they're giving advice on people writing a CVs, is once you've explained that, can you put a number on it at the end of it?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, have you really actually affected a change, or have you been part of a process which kind of got to an answer, or have you actually driven it from the beginning to the end?
That's a really good point, and that's what we typically would advise people, when they're drafting CVs or when they're talking at interview, is articulate what difference that's really made. And even yesterday, I was with someone who was talking about being incredibly commercial, but when I put him under the microscope, it was really hard to be able to say, actually, I've made a huge financial difference to this business. Done amazingly well cleaning up reports, putting in internal controls, new systems. Fantastic work, really valuable. But when going for a commercial FP&A or business partnering role, that's where that individual really comes unstuck. And I think a little bit of this is about guiding people through whether those are really the right roles, or if they're what they want to continue doing. Then you've got to seek out those opportunities internally before then going for them. Because too many people are being interviewed by the likes of yourself and being knocked back, because unfortunately when it comes to the crunch and you're asking for that critical number, what difference have you made, how are shareholders feeling values driven up by you in X, Y and Z, that then is coming back and meaning they're being unsuccessful. So just, I think, a really relevant point for us all.
Yeah, agreed.
I think what most people will be really interested to hear from you will be around the sort of softer characteristics and the sort of emotional capital that people should be displaying in order to be successful, both in role and then thinking from a recruitment perspective, what skills should I be polishing to be more successful?
Yeah, sure. For me, there's a few. Curiosity is one. If you work for an organisation and there's a part of the business that's doing really well, why is it doing really well? There's a part of a business that isn't doing so well. Why isn't it doing so well?
Yeah.
Do you understand your organisation's product, strategy, culture? What's the competition doing? If you think about staying current in your current role, what's shifting in the finance industry? What are the new skills that we need to learn? And even from a macroeconomic perspective, what's going on in the world? So I think having curiosity is really important. Resilience is another thing for finance. Some people say that there's only one team less popular than finance, which is the risk organisation. But for me, if you think about resilience, it's having toughness, and it's the capacity to overcome difficult situations. If you have to tell your business partner the numbers don't stack up, or if you're telling your business partner the numbers are off track and you're going to have to take actions that they don't want to do to get back on track, they're difficult conversations to have. So having resilience will help you get there. And then the final one is connectivity. So, get to know people in the organisation at all levels within the organisation, understand how it works and who works there and what they do. And also spend a little bit of time understanding and speaking to people outside of the organisation to have a broader perspective as well. I'd be interested, Ben, to hear from you. What do you think? What do you hear from recruiters, from hiring leaders, as to the kind of skills and characteristics that they want?
So I'd definitely say the connectivity piece is really interesting. So when I walk around an office, a business that I go and see, it's really interesting to see how that business leader is perceived by his or her teams around them. I had a really fascinating meeting with the CEO of a local engineering company here in Crawley, and he knew absolutely everyone's name. And they also, from the sort of bottom of the rung to the board, were really comfortable saying, "Hey Chris, how you doing?" It was really impressive how he created a culture of excellence and true sort of inclusiveness. Many CEOs will sit in their corner, and I think if you take that down a step to a head of finance business partnering or a commercial analyst, whatever that role might be, it's being, I really love that word you've used, connected. But if you are in a large organisation and you've got a very clear stakeholder, it might be the marketing team, or in a small business where you just need to know everyone, I think it's really evident actually if you think about walking around that room, that department, that business, and thinking, do I know people? Do I know them personally? Yes, I sit in that project meeting week after week, but I actually don't know anything about them. And one of the greatest examples I had was when I was recruiting a CFO for a massive retailer. And the most challenging stakeholder for that business was a retail director who she had grown up with a business. She joined at 16. She was in her late 40s, and she was described as sort of an ice queen. And they had been through CFO after CFO because this individual previously would just never really get under the skin of her drivers and her personality. And the person that I placed in that role saw this in a really, really simple way and just grabbed her and said, look, come and talk to me. Tell me why I'm the 5th person in 8 years. Come and tell me what the challenges are. And that was also met with, having met you for an hour, I would argue a lot of them find you incredibly intimidating. Has anyone ever said that? To which she said no. Because people didn't feel comfortable being connected on a personal level to her. And 4 years on, that person's doing an amazing job and has an amazing business partnership with that retail director who, frankly, I don't think if they'd taken the time to really get under the skin would ever have been successful. So for me, that's a critical one. Just emotional intelligence is absolutely huge. I've recently qualified as an emotional intelligence coach, and so I'm looking into this even more so. It's fascinating, and the key issue here is that people don't really understand how they're perceived. That would be the key one for me, is anyone thinking they know what others would say about them is probably a little way off. And
ask them and find out.
And how few people really ask that question and seek out guidance and ask for feedback. So that links in nicely with your curiosity piece about what's a true business partner, is someone that has demonstrable emotional intelligence, and if they don't have it, seeking out opportunities to develop it, and secondly, someone that has oodles of initiative, someone that seeks out challenges. A really good example would be someone that has identified issues in a business, challenges in the numbers, whatever it might be, and walks up to you and doesn't say, by the way, Jonathan, there's a massive hole in our numbers, what should we do about it? There's a massive hole and I've already gone and talked to these 3 key people. I've got a plan, can I just run it past you? And I would imagine as a hiring leader, or that being your number 2, you would be, that's proper business partnering for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that last point, I couldn't agree more with. I speak to my boss obviously a lot, the CFO of Equinity, and that's his challenge back to me and back to my team and the ones that I place back to them. If you identify something, what are you doing about it? Or how are you trying to drive a resolution to it, rather than looking back to somebody more senior and saying, well, what should we do? Come with solutions and options so that we can close out the issue as quickly as possible.
That's amazing, Thanks very much. So if I wanted to be a finance business partner in 5 years' time, what do I need to think about to keep me current, ahead of my peers, and continuously adding shareholder value?
Yeah, sure. I think about 3 things. The world is becoming more data-driven. We are increasingly automating what we do, offshoring work, and robotics will play a bigger role in the future as well. And I think the final thing for me is that there's ever-changing and new business models that are being created, geopolitical environments that are changing, and there's an increasing amount of regulation. And if we take those three pieces one by one, so what do we need to do as a finance business partner? The world's becoming more data-driven. So for us to do financial analysis, we need to get hold of the big data and understand it, mine it. So either we need to start learning more about coding, or we need to start hiring data scientists into our teams that can do the work for us. So that's a big piece, and I think that will continue to evolve in the next few years as well. From an automation perspective, it'll naturally mean that we'll be doing less transactional processing in the UK and as part of our finance business partner role. And so that will free up time to do more insight, drive more value, take time to look at the business and figure out how it's performing. And then from a new business model perspective, it's relatively easy to calculate the return on investment for a sales team, because you know how many new sales they've generated and how much revenue it's generated. You kind of know how much they cost. But what's changing? How do you evaluate the return on investment for a multi-channel digital acquisition investment, as an example? It might be applying the same techniques, but actually it's much more sophisticated. It's a different way of thinking about the business, and making sure that the money we spend to drive growth is money being spent responsibly and driving the right returns. So that we need to think about differently about some of those traditional skills that we know, applying them to different situations, new business models.
Brilliant. So we've talked a lot theoretically and utilised your experience to date to help people really understand what the role of a true business partner is. Let's make it a bit more practical. So tell us a bit about Equinity. How does business partnering live and breathe in your organisation? And is there a real aptitude and desire for that kind of model, let's say, in this business?
Yeah, sure. If I talk about Equinity for a couple of minutes, it's a FTSE 250 company. It makes about £500 million of revenue, 130 million of profit. It's a technology-led service and payment specialist. We have a number of different divisions. Predominantly, this is a business that originated out of the Lloyd's registrars. So we're the share registrar for more than 50% of the FTSE 100 client base. In 2017, we bought the share registrar business from Wells Fargo in the US, so we've now been able to expand into the US for the first time.
Wow.
And we do other things as well. So we're a pensions administrator for the Cabinet Office, for the NHS, and also we have a digital business that provides customer remediation services to financial services companies. So at the minute we're doing a lot of work with our financial services partners on helping remediate PPI claims.
Oh, right.
And we also have a number of other divisions, including a credit services organisation where we have a loans platform that helps B2B clients provide unsecured loans to consumers as well. So it's a really interesting business model. It's very dynamic, it's complex, there's a whole different number of pieces to it. From a finance perspective, we're on a journey, there's no question. What I really like within finance is that we have great ownership in working with the CEOs to drive the business. And our CEO and our CFO holds the finance directors accountable for running the business as much as the CEOs. So it's pretty empowering to be part of that organisation. And we get involved in a lot of commercial work. That's working on new deals, renewing deals with customers, thinking about how we grow the business. We have an operations finance team that spends a lot of time looking at our operations organisation. Part of it's based here in Crawley. But we've got a ways to go. We're on a journey, as I said. A lot of our processes actually are still pretty clunky and Excel based, and so we're currently in the middle of a transformation project to get Workday on board, and I would like off the back of that to get Adaptive Insights to do a lot more automation around the reporting, the planning, and start to automate some of our forecast processes. And equally, we kind of ourselves need to move away from the transactional process element and make sure that we create time to do more insight, to do more analytics, and help grow the business even more. So it's a great business to work for. I think the finance organisation plays a key role within Equinity, so it's a really interesting place to work. We've definitely got a ways to go.
Brilliant. And if you were to compare that to the likes of Amex when you were there, how many years ago were you at Amex?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you've still got fresh memories.
Yeah.
How different, more challenging, easier to be a true business partner is this as an organisation? What holds you back? What would facilitate quicker partnering?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time at American Express, and I had a fantastic opportunity to do a number of different roles, work with really intellectual, clever people, and be involved in some really interesting projects as well. The reason that I moved to Equinity was because I wanted to move to a UK-based organisation. I wanted to be a little bit closer to the decision making, and move to a smaller company. With American Express, it's a massive organisation, clearly, hugely successful, very, very successful. There's a lot more about influencing and getting stakeholder engagement to get what you wanted to get done. But equally at American Express, there were great opportunities to do some really interesting projects as well. So they're two very different business organisations, but both equally interesting to work for.
And I imagine you'd find it, very different if you stepped into a £30 million owner-managed organisation, but the role of being a business partner never changes, does it?
No.
A lot of people will look at this and say, well, it's easier. You're putting millions into Workday, which, by the way, everyone seems to be doing.
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be sort of reality check as well around. Not everyone has the investment around those data insights. You talked earlier about hiring data scientists. We've just done that for our very small business because we've seen the investment it's paid off.
Yeah.
So I think it's useful to say that, because I think a lot of people will listen to this and go, well, hold on, you've got bigger budgets, bigger ability to make an insight. But what would you say to the people working in smaller organisations that listen to that and go, well, how do I make a difference? What do I need to do in order to really make this live and breathe in my organisation? And perhaps the answer's not going to be hire a data scientist or invest in Workday?
Sure, it's a good question. I would be less interested on the size of the thing that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I worked for British Airways and I worked in the headquarters finance team in the passenger business, and the numbers were massive.
Yeah.
And I moved into the cargo finance organisation, and the numbers were really tiny.
Okay.
And I realised very quickly, actually, I can make a bigger difference by talking to our customer service agents about managing costs within the cargo organisation. They were much smaller, but had a bigger impact on the division. So I wouldn't always be so focused on the size of the number you're looking at necessarily. Okay. You're right, not every business lends itself to having sophisticated data analytics, but in any business, no matter how big or small, you can still do the analysis. You can still look at the business and see how it's performing and start to make recommendations about how you want to do it differently.
Brilliant. Well, one of the things, there are probably two issues that come up in the recruitment process at the moment, which I'd like to sort of just get your take on. Lots of organisations the size of yours say to us, we'd like candidates coming from large blue chip businesses. They'll get us, they'll fit into that culture quickly, they'll understand what a matrix organisation feels and looks like. Yeah. What's your take on that? Because you've never said that to me, but it's something that I'm constantly hearing, and I'm sure people listening to this would be going, yeah, that's super frustrating.
Yeah, well, I learned a lot from working for American Express. So if somebody can come and talk to me about some of those experiences I was lucky and fortunate enough to get at American Express, then it's massively valuable. I mean, it's a real skill to work across an HQ that's based over in New York, to work with local finance partners that are in London. That you're working with a global business partner or an Italian country manager that's managing their own P&L as well. Plus, of course, you get to work with people from different countries and different originations, which is a great experience as well. So, I am a big fan of having those opportunities, but it's not necessarily the be all and the end all. There are still plenty of opportunities in a smaller organisation to work across different stakeholders, different divisions within the organisation, and learn it that way.
And to your point earlier about the cargo bit of work, business that you work for, I'm sure if you saw the right individual and they worked for that £25 million business, but they epitomised the curiosity, the accountability, the emotional intelligence, actually all of those things would go away.
Having worked at a company or another company.
Yeah, brilliant. And do you have a similar view regarding sector? Because again, the further up the food chain we recruit, the more inherently viable it seems to be that clients are wanting us to have sector knowledge. I would say 8 out of 10 executive search mandates require industry knowledge. Yeah. What's your take on that from a personal perspective?
Yeah, as I've looked for jobs outside of, as I've progressed my career over time, and been through interview processes, that there is sometimes do you have different industry experiences? If you want to move into retail and you don't have retail, how easy is that to do? I think again it comes back to how you can position the things that you've learned and how they're applicable in a different industry. But I think that skills are transferable, and I think it's, as we just talked about, it's more about potential and being able to demonstrate how you're going to adjust to a new industry. If you can, as you go through your career, get different industry experiences, I think that's a good thing to have on your CV, because you can then, you might have worked in a manufacturing or financial services or a retail online business, and if you can pick off some of those, they're different skill sets to have, different industry knowledges to have, and I think that's really valuable.
It's really good to hear, because I think that will certainly leave people upbeat. It's probably the biggest bugbear in the recruitment sector at the moment, and something we're on a sort of crusade to try and change. Totally in agreement with everything you've just said. Thank you so much for all of that. I think we've really covered a lot, but I think you've definitely sort of blown the cobwebs off what people think a business partner is, and we've talked about experiences people should have, the softer skills, the sort of characteristics that they should be embodying if they were going for a role or just trying to be even more successful in that. So I hope that's been really valuable to everyone listening to that, and I for one would love to thank you so much, and great to debate this with you. Thanks so much.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.